I think we need this, and so I'm excited about this kickoff today. I have a couple of notes here. It's awesome to see strong women who have stepped up over the course of their career, their lives, come to offer their perspective on leadership and service. So to the panel members, Strike, Clock, Sonny, Chief Mosich, Chief Select Bruner, and currently Ashton as well. So thank you all for your participation. Today you're here to listen to the panel members on the personal and professional experiences and challenges and obstacles that they faced in their life, and how they faced up and overcome. I hope you hear in their stories that you're not alone in your experience and your struggles on this crazy journey we call life. I hope you see in them trailblazers and role models, and amongst the crowd and in them and in yourselves wingmen as we face this this crazy life together. When I was interviewing to be a Thunderbird a long time ago, there was someone on the team, Fifi Malachowski, speaking of trailblazers. She was the first ever female Thunderbird pilot, and as I was interviewing, and I knew her before. She was a Strike Eagle pilot, and we got a chance just to share some stories, and she got to talk about some of her experiences as she was interviewing, and frankly, I was shocked. There were a lot of folks who did not appreciate that she was a female flying fighters and flying on the Thunderbirds. It wasn't that long ago either. And some of the things were pretty nasty. And when I got hired a couple times later, I got rejected a couple times. When I got hired to come on the team, the person I was replacing as a solo pilot, her name was Samantha Combo Weeks. And she was the first female solo pilot. And so as I started to learn from her, and she taught me to fly the F-16 and to fly, as in that role, I learned to appreciate, and I echoed her words and her perspective, that the folks in the crowd could care less who was flying that F-16. They didn't care if you were yellow or striped or polka dot or a guy or a gal, right? And so when I brought Sam over to the house, I got 4 kiddos and my wife Katie, and I said, hey boys, this is Sam Combo. She's teaching me to fly the F-16. She's like my teacher, right? And later, Combo pulled me aside and said, that was amazing. I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, to be a part of a time in which someone, without any sort of hesitation, just said, hey, this female is the person I'm learning from, is the person who's teaching me, is the person I look up to and I'm beholden to, and it never crossed my mind, but for those kids, it's setting the stage for the rest of their life on their views, on their outlook, their relationships as well. And so in those first couple of examples, both for Fifi and Combo, and then many since then, it really has shaped my outlook, if you will, from that trailblazer, from that professional responsibility. But it did leave me with a sense, and this was a while ago, but it left me with a sense that we've got a long way to go. And I get a sense that we probably still have some issues that we need to work with. All that to say that it takes courage to tell some of these stories, to open up, to channel my inner Brené Brown, vulnerability is the new courage, right? So to be able to open up, all of you guys, thank you for that. It takes courage, I think, to admit that maybe not everything is perfect in Whoville, as much as we'd like to pretend that it is, and we have some real issues still to deal with. So I wanted you to hear from me that I'm committed to helping to make the 366 Fighting Wing a place in which every member, every person has the opportunity to reach her full potential. And it starts with events like this. So I'll just conclude by saying thank you to Tech Sergeant C.R. Frazier for facilitating. We actually went to the same high school in Oklahoma. You may not know that. So Eagles, different times though, for what it's worth, as well as Master Sergeant Holly Russell, who has put together this event. And finally, I'd like to thank again the panelists, Colonel Astrom, and really all of you for taking the time. And again, this is an important first step, and I'm very proud and grateful for each and every one of you. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the mic back over. Thank you again for your attendance. Thank you for the work putting this together. I'm going to sneak out the side, and we'll just head it directly over. No need to do anything else, okay? Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Colonel Goodman. Before we continue, I would like to introduce and welcome the mentorship panel. The Commander, 366 Maintenance Squadron, Lieutenant Colonel Angelina Stevens. A F-15E pilot, 389 Fighter Squadron, Captain Jennifer Gillette. The Child and Youth Program Flight Chief, 366 Force Support Squadron, Ms. Sonia Grace. The Superintendent, 366 Fire Wing Air Staff, Chief Master Sergeant Emily Mosich. The Superintendent, 366 Force Support Squadron, Chief Select, Senior Master Sergeant Julia Bruner. Finally, I'm Tech Sergeant Frazier from the 366 Force Support Squadron, and I'll be your facilitator today. Please direct your attention to the screen behind the panel members. For those of you who are in the audience or watching through your Zoom app, if you have any questions for the panel members, please direct your questions in the Zoom chat. If you would like your questions to be anonymous, send your question directly to the Education Center account instead of all personnel. If you don't know how to do that, there's like a drop down, and then you can select who you want to send that message to in Zoom. Also in the chat, we are uploading brochures that highlights information about the panel members and the guest speaker. Lieutenant Colonel Stevens, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Russell said we'll have to grab the microphone. Can you guys hear us okay? So you have a maintainer of the microphone, which is always a good time. It's really glad to be here. And Sergeant Russell, thank you for setting this up for us. I know you've been dreaming of doing this for a long time, so I'm excited to see it finally come together. A little bit about myself. So I started out in 2003. I'm a graduate of an ROTC program in Northern California, 17-year aircraft maintenance officer. It was my first choice, and something from day one, I was really glad to be able to do something that I'm still very passionate about. I also had a background in linguistics. From early days, I spent about 10 years in the language-enabled airman program. So I was able to do some kind of cool things as an interpreter and jumping off of my career field to do things with that. I also took a detour. The Air Force takes you down some curves sometimes. Took a detour into the Intel community based on a university they sent me to for a few years. So I spent a little bit of time in Intel. Did a tour at headquarters Air Force in DC, and then I'm here in command of the 366 MXS of the War Eagles. I also have been working some efforts with ACC and the Women's Initiative team, if you're familiar, as the co-chair for a psychological safety working group. And we've been looking a lot of mental health and taking care of airmen and issues that really focus on families and women's issues and things as well. I've been joint spouse for 16 of my 17 years. So we rolled just the two of us for about 14 of those years, and now have two small kids, 2 and 4 years old. They're through the CDC at Mountain Home. And husband is also in command, and he's deployed right now. So we've been doing the joint spouse thing for a very long time, and that's kind of just the top points of our career. Like I said, been in maintenance and in a high enlisted, male-dominated career field. We have a lot of women leaders within our career field, and so been excited to see this come together and hear from some of the other panelists. So.
Thank you, Colonel Stevens. Captain Gillette, can you please share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Captain Jennifer Gillette, and I graduated from Florida Institute of Technology in 2010, so quite a while ago. I got my bachelor's in pre-professional biology while playing college soccer as a soccer team captain there for 4 years. And then I went on to get my MBA at Florida Tech as well, where I was a member of the women's rowing team. I initially wanted to go to vet school, so Air Force flying was never in the cards for me. And then I kind of just got a little bit sidetracked, played semi-pro soccer for a little bit. My dad, who was in the Coast Guard for 30 years, is like, you should look into the military. I'm like, no, that's a great idea. So I did. It was a perfect fit for me, being like an athlete. I compare a lot of my things to sports. I think the military is a very tight family like that. And then a year later, I was in OTS. So I graduated OTS in November of 2014, at which point I was selected to attend pilot training at NJEP, which is Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training, which is a specific type of pilot training tailored to training fighter pilots, more or less. Once I completed pilot training, I was lucky enough to be selected to fly the F-15E Strike Eagle, And after that, I went to Introduction to Fighter Fundamentals, basically to learn how to be a fighter pilot. And then I went to the B course, or Formal Training Unit, Seymour Johnson, where I was for 9 months and was a graduate of Lancers in 2017. I've been here for about 3 years. Sadly, in PCS next month, back to Seymour, being an instructor. And it's been awesome. I'm a 4-ship flight lead now and the T-Bolts, and I'm also the chief of mission planning, so that's where my leadership experience stems from. I'm also a member of the All-In Forces women's soccer team, so I was in No Kidding Wuhan in October of 2019 before it was cool, where I represented the Air Force in the military at the Military World Games, which is the equivalent of the military Olympics. So that was super cool, and then after that, I joined the T-Bolts on a 6-month deployment, where I was able to fly 75 combat sorties and get over 350 combat hours. I'm a huge proponent of girl power, love it. There's much more female fighter pilots in the Air Force now than there ever was. I've been to a couple different AFWorks events where we're trying to basically increase the performance and proficiency of aircrew flight equipment for women, because that is definitely, while the atmosphere and attitude for female fighter pilots has increased and changed drastically, the flight equipment has not. So it's definitely on the up and up now, and so I'm very passionate about that kind of stuff, obviously as a female aviator, and happy to be here.
Thank you, Captain Gillette. Now, Ms. Grace, can you share a little about yourself?
My name is Sandy Grace. I'm the flight chief for a child and youth. My story is going to be slightly different as the only civilian on the panel. I started my career in Air Force childcare in 1994. That's going to date me a bit. Sorry to put that out there. As a military spouse, a PCS kind of drove my career. I, much like many military spouses, had to move with my husband, who was active duty, and it forced some childcare issues and a change in my career path. And in order to meet my personal goals, I felt I needed to do something that contributed to my family. I felt I still wanted to do something that gave back to my community. And I battled, like most parents do, with my desire to be a parent. Family childcare just kind of fell in my lap, and I became a family childcare provider. As I moved around with my military spouse, I really gathered a sense that military spouses and military families have the same struggle face to face: childcare, relocation, schools, education, and it compelled me to move my career forward. I finished my master's degree in early childhood and in teaching adults. Because a lot of our dealings, while not in the classroom, are with adults. And I went even further to complete Air Command and Staff College and Air War College, because I felt that that would give me a rounded perspective and a better ability to maybe serve the family members that come into my programs. I'm honored to sit on this panel, again, because my story will be slightly different than other people's. And one, because I represent a lot of military spouses whose careers go on hold temporarily, or who have to make a change in their career path in order to meet the needs of their military spouse. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grace. Chief Message, can you please share a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. I am Chief Master Sergeant Emily Mussich. I've been in the Air Force for a little over 20 years. I started out at Robins Air Force Base doing air battle management on JSTARS, and I cross-trained to be a C-17 loadmaster at about my 5-year mark. I spent the next 15 years up until about 4 months ago as a C-17 loadmaster. I did prime nuclear airlift. I went to the AOC and did mission planning. I worked in the information operations team for a little while. I've deployed 5 times, and I just got married back in 2017. So my husband and I have been married for about 3 years. He is from Bosnia, and he is not associated with the military except for being a military spouse. But I come home, and he's got the grill going, and F-15 flies over, and the dog's sitting there next to the grill, and he was like, I am living the American dream. I have my dog, and I've got F-15s. And so he is embracing the military life. We do not have any kids. It's just the 2 of us. So it has been an extraordinary journey getting where I'm at today. And I look forward to the opportunity to answer your questions today and share a bit about how we came I came to be where I'm at today. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Chief Montage. Senior Master Sergeant Bruner, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Senior Master Sergeant Julia Bruner. My story is a little bit different than everyone else's. I came into the military in 1996. You don't have to do the math, that's 24 years. I had no plans to join the military. I quit high school, I went to go to work, which was something that was common in my family. No one graduated from school, got a GED, and when I turned 20, I was like, you know, maybe I'll go see a recruiter. So long story short, I had to get a high school diploma, join the military, and my first duty station was in Little Rock, Arkansas. I didn't go too far from home, from Texas. And from Little Rock, I left there a year later, went to OSAN, and so began my love for the Pacific Air Force. I've spent 3/4 of my career over the Pacific, from Guam to Okinawa, back to Okinawa, a few tours in OSAN, and several exercises out in the Pacific. I was mill to mill. I'm recently divorced. I'm a single mom. I have a 17-year-old. And because she spent so much time in the Pacific, she'll be graduating this year and going back to school in Korea, to the Korea University. I've done a lot in services, from food service to lodging to readiness. I've been at the Defense Language Institute as an athletic director, and I'm really excited to share my story with you guys. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity.
Thank you, Sergeant Bruner. All right, ladies, let's start with the questions. From our audience, you guys hear how much diversity is on this stage, so please don't be afraid to ask any questions. We're going to start with the questions that are already ready. What drove you to be successful?
Mike's here, so. I come from a family of 7, and like I mentioned, GED, survival was just not an option growing up. We grew up really poor, so I never really looked at it as success. I looked at it as, hey, I got to get up tomorrow and I got to get it going, got to keep it moving forward. And over the years, you know, and a lot of moms can attest to this, when you have children, you want to set the example. And I knew that if I wanted to push my daughter in the direction of college, I had to go and get some college myself. So that drove my education and the job, you know, just constantly hearing. I had an ex-husband who was, you know, you might make master, you might make senior, but you're never going to make chief. And just those thoughts just stuck in my head. Nope, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to prove them wrong. But you know, later on, you come to find out that my success over the years, it's changed, and my drive has changed. It's always been something else. But now, in the last 2 years, it's not so much for my daughter anymore, and it's not so much because someone told me I couldn't, but it's because I want to do it now, and I want to be successful. I love myself now. You know, you've got to love yourself, and I think self-love is really what drives success. So.
This is one of those hard questions for me to answer because my path to success was a very unhealthy one. When I came in the Air Force, actually before I came in the Air Force, and I first told my mother that I wanted to join the Air Force, my mother's reaction was, you won't even make it through basic training. So from basic training, I got I am going to do this and I'm going to show you I can do it. And I had success in basic training, honor graduate. I got into tech school and I had a lot of success. And early in my career, I experienced pretty severe trauma. And when I went through that trauma, my coping mechanism was to focus on work and to, if someone told me I should do something, I was going to do it and I was going to do it perfectly. And when it came time for testing for promotion, I had to pass that test. And in an unhealthy way, not in the I want to take care of airmen or I would be better at the next rank. But I looked at that test every time as a validation of whether or not I was okay. As long as that promotion test told me I was okay, then I could keep going. And I used that just as long as I'm promoting, as long as the people at work tell me that I'm doing good, then I have succeeded in not letting this experience in my life define who I am. And when I got higher up in rank, and when the longer this went on, the more unhealthy it became. And I really broke down, and I was, from the time that I had a line number to senior until well into the time that I made chief, I battled really hard with mental health. And it's only been within the last year or so that I feel like I've come back to being myself and being mentally healthy. And it's exciting because I'm finding myself, but I also, it's a struggle. And I've ended up at a level of operation that I succeed at and that I do well and I take care of people. And I come home and I'm like, yeah, I did well today, but it's taken me a lot to get here. It was definitely not a healthy road, which is, I hope not the case for most people, but it was the case for me.
There's so many things I think that drive success, internal things like your own battle with yourself. I think most of us that are in a leadership role have probably dealt with some of those perfectionist issues. I know I have external things that drive you to succeed. As Sergeant Bruner said, being a role model. I too have 3 daughters, and I would like to role model to them that it's never too late. You can do it when you're ready, but always continue to learn. But for me, I think what drives my success is I serve a phenomenal group of people, and I serve some of the Air Force's greatest assets, somebody's children. And when I put it into that perspective, it's not necessarily about me always, but about what I can do to evoke change and how I can serve somebody else. And I think that continues to drive me forward each and every day. The opportunity to give back for me as a propellant, more so probably than my internal drive for perfection, because I do have that too.
So I'm definitely still on the road to success. I'm still pretty young, I've lived in the Air Force 6 years, so significantly less than everybody here. But for me, it all started back post-college when I realized I didn't want to sit at a desk, that I needed something a little more high speed, a little more competitive, especially with my athletic background. So I channel a lot of the things that made me a successful athlete into being a successful fighter pilot. So like being motivated, driven, dedicated. A lot of hard work goes into being a good athlete and being a good pilot. Other things like humility or having the ability to be coachable, as well as being able to take criticism well. I think that's something that females in general in this community struggle with, as being told you suck, and how to take that not personally, but professionally, and then get better from there. I know I struggled with that heavily in pilot training, but I've gotten a lot better at it now. Just know that they're just trying to make me a better aviator, a better officer, a better leader. So I think all of my athletic history has channeled really well into me in my career right now, and so I rely pretty heavily on that. I'm very competitive. Being a fighter pilot is a very competitive job. It's also very physical. Turns out flying a multi-million-dollar high-performance military aircraft is a physical thing. It's athletic. You must be athletic and in shape to do it, so it translates very well for me. And then besides having all of that athletic background and qualities transfer over, just having a great support system. My dad was in the Coast Guard for 3 years, like I mentioned. He's for sure in my corner along with my mom, so I can always count on them. They're super proud of me, which is awesome. And then my friends, my family, my coworkers, always being there for me to help guide me in the right direction and give me that mentorship, and then be in my corner when I'm feeling down on myself, which is often because I'm a perfectionist to a degree, and I kind of have to be in this job. And so just for them to raise me up when I'm down and realize that this is totally normal. It's okay to not be great right now, but you will be eventually. So I think all that combined has led me to where I am today, and hopefully I'll continue as my career goes on.
So I kind of struggled with this question when Russell first sent it out because it's a big question. I think I can relate, when I entered the Air Force, I can relate to a lot of what Bob just mentioned as far as being drawn to the military. I've never told me why I joined or why I wanted to do what I was going to do, but I was drawn to it from an athletic background and just some of those similarities, and it gave me something that I lost, when I stepped away from some of those kind of things in my life. When I entered into some of how I entered the Air Force and my leadership experience was a little bit different to a lot of the people here in a lot of other career fields, in that I wasn't a technician. My job and the purpose of my job and my purpose when I stepped into my first role was very different to what I was used to. I grew up from not a very well off background. I had 3 jobs going through college, and a level of debt to get through college that took 15 years to pay off. And so I was used to being a worker and having the job where you knew what you were going to get back if you poured in. And then I showed up to my first job as a flight commander of 120 people, and my job was not clear. I was in charge of 120 people, and what that means, when you've been in the Air Force less than a year, is something that I would say what drove my success was just seeking to find things where I could use that time that was and make it valuable to the people in the unit. And instead of just sitting and trying to learn, which obviously that's kind of the lieutenant's job in maintenance, is you just learn. But taking a look at the organization, I wasn't the one holding the gears together in the organization. If I stepped away day to day, everything would happen. It's a hard thing to realize that if you walked away, it would all just keep happening. Instead, it was taking a look and finding opportunities to solve problems that other people didn't have time to solve, and see where things could be better, or where they had needs that, again, nobody else had time to just run down the rabbit hole and figure out for them, and try to make things better, and try to just listen and understand ways I could give back to the unit as I was just trying to find my purpose, again, stepping into a leadership role pretty early in my career. So I think that was a huge piece of it for me, and just not accepting, realizing through that experience and early on, not accepting the status quo and being able to take a look at a unit and realize there are things you can do beyond just managing the day-to-day, and making time for that can sometimes be more valuable to them than just managing the operation. So I think that's
Thank you, ladies. So next question. What are some of the biggest challenges you face while trying to lead others? Or trying to influence or lead others?
So my leadership experience, like I mentioned, is quite different. I've never led 120 people as an aviator, especially a younger one. That's just not in the cards for us. We started out just training, being a good pilot, learning how to be a good wingman, and then a good flight lead. And it's not really that we're in charge of many other people until later in our careers. So I'm a chief of about 5 people in a shop right now, so not a ton. My biggest challenge with that portion is delegating. I have a hard time doing that, which I know is super important, but I know if I do it myself, then I can trust what I've done, and it's probably right, maybe. But if I let those duties go to other people, it's going to come back to me if it's done wrong or not done at all. So having faith and just trust that other people are going to do their job is a challenge for me. Again, perfectionist type mentality. As far as flying goes, so I just finished like the 4-ship flight lead upgrade, which essentially means that I'm in charge of leading around 3 other airplanes, and this is the biggest leadership experience that most aviators deal with younger in their careers before they're a squadron commander, DO, something like that. And my biggest challenge with that, and always has been, and probably will be for a while, is just being confident. So you could take me to a soccer game anywhere in this country with men or women, and I'm going to be confident that I'm going to go hold my own. I know that I'm good at soccer, and I'm fine with that, and I have no problems. I'm never going to be nervous. But if you put me in charge of a 4-ship of jets, I'm new at this still, like very young. I only have, I have less than 1,000 hours, which is a decent amount, but still, I haven't been doing this as long as other people. So I think people feed off of that. So for me to, I know I'm self-deprecating, and I just have to be confident, because it's like sharks sniffing blood in the water for other people in the formation. If they sense that their leader is not confident in what they're doing, the mission, what you're going out there to execute, then they kind of feed off of that. So I just am trying to teach myself still that I need to be confident in what I'm doing and at least fake it till you make it and portray that to everyone around me in the formation as we're about to take out 4 $15 million airplanes, that I know what I'm doing. I'm going to make sure that we do it safely and well. So I'm constantly working on that, and I think with more experience, I'll be fine. Just like I've been playing soccer for 20 plus years, and I have no issues with that. I'm hoping in a few more years of flying that I will be able to exude that confidence that a leader needs to have, and that so people can feed off of my energy.
I think one of the challenges I've had leading others is really probably my own in articulating to leadership, not necessarily leading, but in articulating to leadership the value and importance of child and youth. And we've made great strides in how influential that is in driving the mission. But when I first started, really we looked at child and youth as babysitters. I can tell you, I have never sat on a baby, and that is a common, constant joke. But that is what child and youth was looked at, is babysitting. And so where I struggled was, it's an emotional field. We take care of children and we deal with families. No matter what we do, there's an emotion tied to it. When I was merging as a leader, I think my struggle was relaying its importance without the emotions behind it, and finding the statistics and the facts that need to be relayed to establish its importance. I had to work hard at that. You always want to advocate for your people, and I did, but I needed to learn to do that without the emotion behind it. And once I figured out how to do it, I think I'm a better leader to my people, because then I can relay back to them the why we do what we do, why it's important, and then I can relay that message again up to leadership.
I think one of the biggest struggles that I have with leading and influencing is more when I get excited about something, and when, like, if there's a project and I'm really excited about it, but you have to delegate and you have to allow other people the opportunity to get their own excitement and do things in their own way, and you're like, I'm so excited, and then they're doing it, you're like, okay, that's not quite developing into what I was envisioning, but then trusting that in the end you're going to be just as excited about what they've done as what you would have been excited about if you had done it yourself. And so I think the more that I've promoted, and the needing to trust the people below you to do it, and the having your own excitement but not letting your excitement drown their excitement out, I think that's probably one of my biggest challenges that I've experienced in the leader.
So in my job, my facilities are all spread out, and I'd say my biggest challenges are time, distance, and balance. I want to be out with my people, and once I get out, I don't get back to the job for hours. And sometimes I get hyper-focused at work, and I'm taking care of administrative things, and I don't get out to the people like I should. So finding that balance with time and distance and them being away from me is a little bit difficult. And I'm getting there, prioritizing or not, but honestly, that is the biggest challenge, is just time and distance and balance.
Thank you, ladies. Dr. Bruner, your response actually just leads me to my next question. How have you juggled being a career woman and a mom and a very committed relationship at the same time? This is for all of you.
Well, I'm divorced. Okay, all jokes aside, no, seriously, there were months, let me go back years, that, like you said, I would get to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, drop my daughter off at the youth center, and my ex-husband would pick her up after school. I wouldn't get home until 7:30 at night because I didn't know how to turn it off. Once I did get divorced, I continued that behavior, and it wasn't healthy for her. I was missing so many things, and I wasn't present. So I had to make a decision, to be present, and that was the hardest thing. So I started bringing my laptop home. not a good idea every single night, because again, I still wasn't present. But I finally decided, you know what? This is going to be here tomorrow. I can turn this off and it's going to be here tomorrow. I was getting home, I realized I was tired and I wasn't putting my all into it like I should have. And I missed out on so many moments. And once I started missing out on those moments, and my daughter got older and she'd say to me, well, I told you that, Mom. Remember? We talked about this. No. But I think for me, that was my wake up, and that was my juggle with home and work, was just deciding, you know what, if it's not done by 5:00 p.m., I'm turning off my computer and I'm going home. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. I'm still struggling with lunches, but you know, it all works itself out. And I think you just have to find that balance and say, nope, I'm going home. I'm going home. And it's okay.
I'm a little bit spoiled right now because my husband is a stay-at-home husband with no kids. So I come home to amazing meals and the house is clean. He is going to school right now though, and hopefully June is going to be looking for a job, and I am a little bit intimidated about having to face this balancing act that I've not had to do. My husband definitely helps me out amazingly in getting things with work done because he allows me to focus on work, and he takes care of them. So I'm lucky that way.
Early on in my career, I was really fortunate. As I said, family child care fell in my lap and it allowed me to stay at home. And so it was really easy to balance home life and work life because I did them both in the same space. As I progressed into the child development center and moved up in my career, I have found it increasingly difficult to balance my time. I am probably the worst at it. I am notorious, as Senior Brené said, for taking my laptop home, for working on weekends. I think it takes for me having somebody in my life, my spouse, my children, to be like, hey, can you disconnect? Because I'd really like to connect with you. And that reminder serves, for me to turn things off. I think it's a common struggle, though, for dual working families to find that balance. And that is one of the things we try to support in the child and youth programs, because I think we know parents are burning the candle at both ends. And if we can be there to ease some of that, maybe we can just make it a little bit easier. If I could teach that to myself, though, I would probably be a little better off.
So this one for me changed. This answer evolved throughout my career because in the early days, like I said, 14 years we spent, and it was joint spouse. So I came from some of my experiences growing up made me very stubbornly passionate that one of my life goals was to have a marriage that outlasted my career. So I was pretty stubbornly focused on that balance. I don't know what the word is because there's no such thing as balance, but on like consistency in putting time into a relationship. It was something that was important to me from a young age. But as joint spouse, it was just us rolling with the punches, and we could fit it in when we could. And people say joint spouse must be really hard, and it is, but it's also easy in some ways. Like Sandy having to find jobs everywhere she went. Everywhere we went, we both had jobs. The Air Force just told us where to go. When one of us deployed, the other one related because we both loved deploying, and it was, man, have fun and I miss you, but it wasn't some of the challenges that are faced with typical military spouses. And so there's some pieces of it that was just the two of us, because we prioritized it. I think we did a better job with that than some, again, because I was stubborn about it. It was hard. Where it became kind of a different ballgame for me was when it came to starting a family and some of the things that go along with that. The stress that goes along with attempting to start a family, which for us was a very long journey. Took us a long time to reach a point where we could try, and then we suffered through many miscarriages, one further along while my husband was deployed, which added a layer of just this element of being a mom, has some layers to it that kind of hit us like a brick wall, hit us like a steam train. And when it came to having my son, my 4-year-old, I personally struggled. I mean, pregnancy and all the stress associated was hard, but we were rolling with the punches. And after I had my son, had some pretty severe postpartum anxiety and depression that, again, added another layer that you don't think about when you haven't experienced it to, you know, being a mom, starting a family in the military. And one of those things when you're struggling from a mental health perspective, you're not managing or controlling anything in your life. It kind of controls you and it kind of controls those interactions. And I wasn't somebody who was present in a marriage. I was a whole other being during that period of time. And so the strain on him and the struggles he went through and some of the struggles we went through were actually found, you know, when you look at some of the typical people go, it must be hard having kids and making time, being pregnant and dealing with those kind of things in the workplace. And I actually found that people, my husband and I found that people were way more sympathetic to me taking the time I needed or taking care of kids. My husband and I were in very high profile jobs in the Pentagon, and he struggled more to say, hey, the kid's sick, she took the last 3 sick days, it's my turn. And he actually struggled with more bias and things, putting his 50-50 into parenting. So we found as a family, for us, I think we took for granted how hard it is to be in the military and have a family, because we waited a long time to do that piece of it. And I think, you know, no matter what you're struggling with, it doesn't have to be those extreme things, but even for us, coming out of, you know, again, some pretty severe mental health challenges, it still became a matter of just consistently putting the work in to prioritize family, whether it's the kids, whether it's the spouse, and whether it's yourself, which in some cases I think that's where I neglect, and then it affects the marriage or the kids or something else like that. So I will pour lots into the spouse and say, hey, this is our time, but something after all those experiences that I've actually found was maybe more important to my family relationships, to my marriage, to my kids, was actually taking time away from them for myself so that I could be the right person and be present for them. So I think that's probably the biggest lesson learned for me is if you do all those things and you pour into everybody else, if you're not taking that time to make yourself a solid foundation, the rest of it will fall apart no matter how much time you spend.
Thank you, ladies. So this is probably my favorite question, and I can't wait to hear your answers. Have you ever felt that if you say the same thing as your male counterparts, he is viewed as a strong leader, but you are viewed as confrontational? How did you overcome this stigma?
I have never felt that way. I'm lucky, like Colonel Cookman talked about, that for sure used to be a thing. Since I started in the Air Force in 2014, I've never felt anybody who's taken anything I've said or done differently or for less than face value because I'm a female. So I'm lucky, and we're all lucky that it's that way now, because I know it didn't used to be that way. So, I mean, I don't have anything negative to say there. As long as I'm credible and approachable, I don't think anyone thinks anything less of what I say or do, because I'm a female. I've never, ever felt that way by anybody in any squadron I've ever been a part of. So I'm very lucky, because I know that it has not always been that way. So hopefully continue to stay that way. I think that would be the trend for the future, but no one that I've noticed, or at least to my face, has ever took anything that I've said or done to not be serious because I'm a girl.
I think I would have to agree with that. I don't think that anybody has discredited what I'd say based on my gender. I would say that it's been difficult to get people to maybe see my value or my worth and my amount of knowledge based on my career choice, but absolutely nothing based on my gender.
I hadn't given much thought to this before one of the chiefs that I worked with when I first put on chief recommended that I read the book Lean In, and I read the book Lean In, and it talked about how if women speak on behalf of someone, it's received better. So instead of saying, I think we should do this because this is what it means for the mission, if you go, I think this is what we should do because it will enable these people to move the mission better, it's received better that way. And so I read the book, and in my stride for being a perfectionist, I tried to employ this. And I tried to use this technique. And I found that my communications actually got worse. And what I think happened, looking back on it, is I stopped communicating authentically and started communicating the way that now something had told me I should communicate. And that, when I started trying to become conscious of it and work within these barriers that previous to reading this book I didn't know existed, once I started trying to navigate barriers, I found them. But I think I found them because I stopped being authentic. So that's been my experience.
I can piggyback off of Chief. For years, I'm very introverted. I speak when I need to, and I keep it moving. You know, I really pour into people when it's one-on-one, and people have often said that I come off as lackadaisic or melancholy, and I give off the air that I don't care, but it's because I'm very methodical and I think about every step I'm taking. And once I stopped trying or started to try to be someone else and be a lot more bubbly and speak to everyone, I got really confused and it became really difficult for me. And I felt like I lost my identity a little bit, but I had to take a step back and I had to really ask myself, was I more effective being introverted and speaking when I needed to? And the consensus for myself was yes. And so I finally got back to myself, and that's been my struggle, is just how for me, I won't say most women, we do wear our I do wear my emotions on my face sometimes, and that's okay. It's okay to just be yourself.
Thank you. So this is a follow-up question off of the last question. So if you feel like you already answered it, feel free just to pass. But this question is, being in a male-dominated organization, have you ever seen blatant or ignorant gender biases, and how did you handle it?
I have a little bit, and normally when they're blatant, they tend to happen at the lower ranks, and they're corrected pretty quickly and swiftly. What I have seen as I've gone up in rank is not a so when I came into the Air Force, and we were all single, and we all got out of basic training, and we went to tech school, and we went to our first duty station. I was just one of the guys hanging out, and it was cool for everyone to go and hang out. But as we grew up and as we got older and people started to get married, the boy-girl friendships were not, you couldn't be as close as you had been before. And the guys do their things and the girls do theirs. And when you are the only female senior NCO and all of the other senior NCOs are going to the bar together or they're going hunting together and you aren't going, not because they don't like you and they don't appreciate you, but it's not necessarily comfortable for them to be like, hey, we're going camping, and hey, wife, I'm leaving you behind, but hey, Emily, come along. And so I found that I missed out on those opportunities where, like, the scotch and cigars, where you sit around and you end up talking about work even though you went out with no intention of talking about work. And I was aware that I didn't have the same bonds, but I did not ever experience where it was like, you're a girl, so I don't trust what you're saying, or I don't believe in you, or I don't believe you're as capable. I just felt the absence of being included in the extracurricular stuff, which I found that difficult.
So kind of just to piggyback, like I've already said my piece about how I felt no different. Honestly, I kind of felt quite the opposite in the beginning. I was the only female pilot select at OTS, and when I got an NJEF slot, there was like 9 for 70 of us. I'm like, well, I was the only girl, like maybe that's why I got that. And then I was in pilot training, and I was the only girl again. I'm like, well, maybe that's why I got this jet, because I'm the only girl, and it would look weird if they didn't give me that, you know. So kind of the opposite, and then as I went further on the training, eventually I was not the only female. And now we have 7 girls in the 389 right now, which is awesome. The 391st has, I think, 6 as well. So we're definitely increasing our numbers. which is great because for the first 4 years of my career, I was the only girl. And I thought maybe I'm getting what I'm getting because I'm a female. And then I realized, no, like I'm disqualified. So it took a long time for me to get to that realization, but it's better that than the opposite, where you would not get what you wanted because you're a girl. The biggest things that we face as female aircrew in general, I've already kind of spoken to it, is the flight equipment. So I don't really think it's a gender bias, but it is taking the Air Force a long time. Females have been flying fighters since 1993, and I just got my first female flight suit like a year ago, which is sad because as personal as this is, like going to the bathroom in a fighter jet is a thing, and it wasn't really a thing for girls up until very recently. So it's awesome. Like I said, I've gone to a couple different conferences. I'm going one next week, literally just for female flight equipment, because girls are not going anywhere anytime soon in the fighter community. We're only increasing our numbers. I just went back to Shepherd Air Force Base and Laughlin Air Force Base with some Strike Eagles, and there are just girls everywhere, and it's awesome to see. I love girl power, but the equipment is not keeping up with the needs that we have. So not just like urinating in flight, like harnesses and G-suits are just not necessarily meant for women. I'm built relatively like a dude, so it's fine, but a lot of girls aren't. Like 5'2" frames with these harnesses and G-suits that come up to here and are suffocating them in the airplane, like that's not okay. And so it's taken the Air Force a long time. They're doing a really great job right now of hearing us out and going to different conferences to talk about what we want as female aviators, how to make things better. And I've been really impressed with the changes. It's just taken the Air Force a long time. Combo Weeks, the colonel that Colonel Goode was talking about, is the spearhead for this. She's awesome, and she's been doing this for a long time. It's just sad that it's taken the Air Force this long to come around to realize, like, oh, girls are flying fighters now, like maybe we should make it easy for them to pee in an airplane instead of not drink water all day. So I love being in a fighter squadron. It's awesome. You're super tight-knit family. You are always going to be a bro, like bro, dude, guys, those are the terminologies. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. I don't think any of us have a problem with it. That's something you learn pretty early on as a girl, especially being the only girl in a pilot training class, is like, you are one of the dudes, and that's fine, and they are cool with it, and I love it. I think it's great. I learned early on the thick skin I talked about is a thing because guys are crude and they're just being boys. If they're not trying to be offensive, if you are offended by anything, if you speak up, they will quickly cut it out. So I've been really impressed with the quality of people that I've been around my entire Air Force career, and I don't think that's a thing really anymore. I've never, like I said, felt any different because I'm a female. As long as I'm a good bro, a good fighter pilot, a good leader, that's all anybody cares about anymore.
So I guess a little bit two different answers, because personally versus what I've seen in units, because maintenance, I will say it's still there. As an officer, do I always see it, and does it always come to me? No. But it is, I mean, I see the people in virtual, there are nonverbals in this room, like it is still there, and it's career field by career field, and at different levels, it's really easy not to see it until somebody speaks up and says something about it. So I will say we're still doing the work to catch some of those communities where people are afraid to speak up, and maybe it's because nobody's spoken up and said, hey, I'm not comfortable with that. Maybe it's too hard to, but that's been something I've seen as a struggle. And it's hard, it's easier said than done sometimes to speak up and say, hey, I'm not okay with that if it's a master sergeant and you're in A1C, you know, or different ranks in a maintenance organization. It's something we've struggled with as a community, but what I've seen over the last, 15, 18 years almost is night and day to what it used to be. Personally, what I've experienced, because again, it's different as an officer. Can you tell, I mean, I'm a fairly perceptive person, can you tell when somebody probably thinks or is judging you based on gender, and you can probably feel that? Yes. I've always, in the earlier parts of my career especially, I'll say I'm probably one of the older people in this room too. Generationally, I grew up in a generation where you just put your head down and you do the work, and you don't worry about what people think, and you don't bring it up, you just press on. So quite honestly, became pretty conditioned to some of the stuff that happened in a career field, and I've had my eyes open to a lot recently where people go, oh my God, that's not okay, and I go, you're right, that isn't it. I've just been dealing with it for 18 years and seeing it. What I've personally experienced is a lot more like what the chief mentioned, is kind of that bias by exclusion. That again, it sometimes took other people mentioning something for me to even think about it and go, you know what, right, that really did kind of suck. Whether it was because of a bias or a stigma, I'll give a couple of generic examples. very recently in the last year or two, was having a conversation with somebody where we were in a common work center and had a leader at a higher level who was big on sports, right? And so would very regularly would ask everybody, he knew everybody's sports team. He knew everybody's everything to do with sports. And that was his opener. In the course of probably 2 to 3 years working with that person, closer than many other people in the organization, somebody was telling a story, and I probably knew more about sports than most people in that room. And I definitely grew up a tomboy. My phone during baseball season, my phone was buzzing more like every 15 seconds with some sort of sports update. So, but never once in that time period did he ask me a single question to do with sports or try to relate with me on that level. Was that some purposeful, conscious thing? No. But was it a bias based on an assumption based on maybe an unconscious bias there? And it took somebody telling that story and another person jumping in and going, well, he never asked me because I was a female. I was like, I do remember a lot of conversations where I was sitting at a table going, okay, I could be a part of this conversation, but I wasn't the one that was going to just jump into it. It wasn't my way. And it did kind of stink. And there were other, not to get into specific circumstances, but other mentoring opportunities and that kind of exclusion where, every other officer in the unit maybe went on a fishing trip or did something, or let's go play basketball at the gym. I played basketball for a decade. I was never the person that was playing basketball at the gym. Those kind of things that you just don't think about. You just go, okay, that's just the way it is. And it takes people kind of bringing up those examples and relating to them afterwards to realize that it was probably something that affected. I was reading a similar thing where it was like that access to mentorship. And it was something I had never thought of before, because I've had phenomenal male mentors in my career, phenomenal. But I've also had quite a few that it was pretty exclusionary, that you just don't think about as you go through it. And then the stigma piece of it, I've talked to people who are general officers, who are colonels, who have been directly told you shouldn't have females too close on your staff because of the stigma. And who have been advised, be careful if you pick. I was a wing exec for a male commander who said he had 2 female execs at one point and was kind of told, ooh, are you sure you want to do that? He was a phenomenal human who flew across the country, promoted to lieutenant colonel, who was like, I don't care what you think, that's the wrong for my exec, but had been told you should be careful because of that stigma. And I think that's a tough one. That growing up as lieutenant, one of the guys, 100%. Your presence becomes inappropriate, makes the interaction inappropriate, even though whatever's going on wasn't inappropriate because you're a female and there's a male, and it's something in maintenance that you struggle with because you go, okay, nobody wants to ask me to go to the marks, I'm the only female, unless it's a group of females, and it gets a little bit tricky. I have some of the more conscious bias, or I've seen sometimes from women, usually in some cases. I have a huge network of amazing military spouses, but I've occasionally had military spouses that are more overtly made comments earlier in my career more so about the fact that we were going to start a family and stay, both of us stay on active duty, and they made some pretty harsh comments about, and some of these were leadership spouses, about the fact that when they found out that we weren't going to follow the path that they thought was natural, which was I would get out, I would take care of the kids. I actually received some very direct, harsh judgment about that, and that's from women, just in a different role, judging the way that we were going to approach our family. So it's not always from men either, and I've had a similar experience with Black we were talking about beforehand. Maintenance and ops, you just don't get it as much, especially on the officer side of the house. You just don't, because you're just all in it together, and you get past it pretty quickly. But it's there, and it's kind of one of those things where you just gotta. I have always been of the same mindset where if you're in a position where you can, you've got to speak up, and if you're not, you've got to find a way to speak up. If it's anonymous, if it's whatever it is, you just got to speak up because it's probably affecting somebody else, and it's probably affecting somebody else worse than it is you. And it sucks and it's painful to bring it up and to move past it and do whatever it takes to kind of fix that culture. But you have to do it because when I see the work centers and the places, pockets where they have gotten past it and created a healthier environment, it's amazing to see people thrive when you get that piece of it out. And it doesn't mean you can't have fun. It doesn't mean you can't make jokes. I think it's something we got to get better with, and it's still there. So.
All right, so now we're moving on to the questions from the Zoom chat. We'll try to limit it to 3 panel members, unless you feel like we really got to get that word out. I'm here for it. So the first question is, what's your favorite thing about being a woman in the military?
girl power. So I mean, I never planned on flying, but I didn't also know I had 0 flight hours going into officer training school. You can get pilot off the street. That's pretty neat. But we're just a minority. So I mean, being a fighter pilot is already pretty rare. There are, I think, less than 70 active duty female fighter pilots in the Air Force right now. So just to be part of the 0.0001% for me is awesome. I think that's pretty cool.
My favorite thing is seeing other women succeed. That's a beautiful thing. It really is. You don't know who or where they come from, but to watch them succeed and watch them smile or go home and be a mom, whether it be a fur mom or a big mom. But I think it's an amazing thing to watch women succeed.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. What would you like to see change for women in the military?
So something that I wouldn't have had an answer to this like a year ago, as like I said, as a woman specifically, but being pretty involved in some of the efforts. ACC's been doing some cool stuff, and then the Women's Initiative team. I honestly entered into some of those efforts going, sorry, I'm more worried about the mental health stuff, the women's issues. And then as I heard people talking about some of their struggles, I really had my eyes opened. And some of the things I experienced, so there's no reason I weren't open to it. So some of the stuff alongside what Brock mentioned earlier, some of what needs to change for women in the military doesn't have to do with like bias and stigma and how people are being treated. It has to do with legitimate policy, equipment, processes and support systems around people. Like when it comes to, to my own personal example, when you look at the actual, medical and mental health, but also legal and policy things surrounding, postpartum and having kids and some of the stuff that has changed for the better. I was in the very first month where I got the full length of maternity leave. That was a game changer. But there's so much when it comes to, again, just policy or just a uniform that fits. There's a lot going on. Some of it's, silly things where you go, okay, hair policy, whatever, no big deal. Some of them are much deeper, and it's just access to care and access to follow-ups and things. Again, my eyes open to all the biological elements of starting a family that don't have to do with policy. People getting, maternity uniforms that don't cost them, thousands of dollars and, out of their own pocket, and little things like that are more just people paying attention to it. And General Holmes, who chaired a lot of our efforts, and he actually made a comparison. I won't use the specific country, but he made a comparison to a country that is, viewed as, maybe not third world, but down in that, at that level. And he said, I did a lot of work with this particular country, and they, their uniforms, they have broader allowances, they have policies, they allow their women to do this when they're having kids, and you want to know what, their women work harder as a result of it. They retain more women, and we think of ourselves as the most leading edge when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and maybe we're not because we're not paying attention to some of these policies. So I think it's really cool seeing people take action on items that need to change instead of just talking about a better climate and culture. So.
The girl mentioned mental health. I think that we need to be more open to mental health for women when it comes to those coming out of domestic violence relationships and removing the stigma associated with those. A lot of times, the first question is, well, what did you do to make that happen to you? And I think there should be more education on domestic violence within the military community for women.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the next question. It's a little long, so bear with me. As a woman in the military, how does pregnancy affect your promotions in your career? Or has it? I have heard of women being turned down for promotions because they had 2 pregnancies in a row.
I haven't ever heard trying to answer this one.
I guess I have had experience. Yeah, having had, so I think it's a tricky one because I didn't That's a tricky one, because I have seen people, and I know for aviators, so on behalf of female aviators or anyone in a technical career field, which isn't mine. I mean, mine's a very technical career field, but I don't have qualifications that expire. I show back up, I lead people. I can lead people while pregnant. Certain things I have to avoid, but it was definitely, for myself, I had to fight continuing to be able to do what I wanted because people were just worried on my behalf, and I had to kind of just go, no, I can still do that briefing, I can still do that project, and I want to, and you're not forcing me, because they almost tried too hard to take care of me in some circumstances. But when it comes to some of those technical career fields, there are some significant struggles, because when you look at like upgrades and things like that some of us in other careers, it's more nuanced. It's, hey, you're probably too stressed and this pregnancy is probably affecting you, so maybe we don't want to put you in that high stress job. And trying to navigate that. And some of them are personal choices that just having a kid, you know, maybe that is the right choice, and it does affect your ability to do certain things, and maybe that's the right answer. I think the people that face those challenges the most are ones that have to step away from upgrade training, step away from, you know, upgrades and things where they're physically not allowed to, and we struggle with the stigma attached to women in maintenance. And you'll hear that, okay, well, they're all working in, you know, debrief, and how do we handle that? Because they physically, you know, it would be dangerous for them to be in certain elements of their career field. And it's, I think it's, I need to say that to work fast. And I think it's gotten a lot better. I think people, like I said, through some of those pieces, I honestly think the having kids and some of the sacrifice you have to make to have kids, I saw my husband face more stigma than I did. Because they went, well, you're the mom, so you staying home for a sick kid, I don't like it. You could tell they didn't like when I had to go home, but for him, it was a different ballgame. It was, why doesn't she? Every single time. Even if he was like, she just did 5 times in a row, it's my turn. I think it's not just the woman who has kids that faces some of those issues. He's probably faced a lot more blowback for those kind of things than I have.
Any additional comments? All right. I probably shouldn't be doing this, but I'm gonna go off of the chat and see if anyone in the audience, does anyone in the audience have a question that they didn't put in the chat? Just checking on you guys first. All right, moving on to the next question. Do you mentor any differently for women than you do for men?
I would say I try very hard not to. And it's, yeah, I mean, I try not to notice, it shouldn't make a difference. And I think there are women that come with issues and have questions about being a woman in the military, and that's a different kind of conversation. But in general, the way you lead, I was terrible about the first part of my career because I sometimes just didn't even notice those issues women were facing. My first deployment to Afghanistan was back in the day where we had to wait for like 45 minutes for a 15-minute phone call at a tent. You got 1 phone call a week. And so I was like, okay, maybe I won't call my husband, I'll call my grandma this time. She's gonna be afraid I'm not okay if I don't call her at some point. And she asked, like, well, are there women, you know? And I was like, I don't know, I guess. Well, how do you handle it without other women? And I counted, there were 3 in like a group of 250, and I hadn't even noticed it. So sometimes for me, I think it's just taking that out of the workplace interactions, but also if there's someone coming to you with a problem that is uniquely because they're a woman and they're dealing with something, have to respect their abilities to do that. But I don't think you should. I try not to.
Yeah, I avoid that as well. I mean, honestly, there's definitely plenty of case-by-case bases where girls have come to me because they know me and feel comfortable asking me about dynamics, or more specifically, when we're kidding, back to it, how to like pee in an airplane, because like that's not a question you're going to go talk to a guy about because they don't know. But when it comes to just like basic aviation type stuff, like it's gender neutral. Like Jet doesn't know your gender, they don't care, you know. So like it's very black and white, I think, for my perspective anyways, as far as like fighter pilot mentorship, or like if people have questions about work, I finish the upgrade. So they're in the upgrade, you know, they can come to me with those questions, and it has nothing to do with gender.
I agree with that. For me, in telling you, we are a predominantly female career field. For us, it is quite rare when we have a male caregiver. And I would say that male caregiver probably receives some bias, more so than the females, just because they're in a female career field and they're dealing with young children. We'll often get, I'm not sure if I want him to change my baby's diaper, or can he work with the older kids and not with the babies? I try very hard to make sure that my mentorship is individual specific. Each person needs different type of mentorship, not gender specific, not any other kind of specific, but that it's relevant to that person that I'm mentoring.
I also don't try and mentor females differently than males. I have, however, mentored females who have had supervisors, previous supervisors who have done that. And I have seen that they come and they're like, my last supervisor told me that as a girl, I'm gonna have to work harder. That in order for me to get the same credit as a guy, I'm gonna have to work harder. And what I've seen that type of mentorship develop into afterwards is that the airman then wonders whether or not the problems that and the counseling that they're receiving based on performance is based on their gender or whether or not it's based on performance. And so I think mentoring that way, it has the potential of planting seeds for thought that might not have grown on their own. And so I personally make a deliberate effort not to mentor in that way. Now, when an airman comes to me and they are experiencing issues and we're in that one-on-one conversation and it's a question, is this because I'm a girl? This is what I'm experiencing. Then conversations like that are fair game. But when you are in those initial counseling sessions and those initial feedback sessions, to just bring up you're a girl and you're going to be treated differently and this is how you navigate it or this is what to expect. I personally think to plant seeds instead of just allowing relationships to develop naturally.
No, I don't mentor differently. I try to approach everyone as an individual. You have to figure out what people's characters are and peel back the onion with them so that you can get to know them and mentor them correctly. And I feel that if we approach it, like she said, as a male-female type of mentorship, then you're going to plant seeds in their head, and thus it creates unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy thinking that they've got to work a lot harder. So, or they don't have to work harder. So, no, I don't.
Thank you. Our next question is, how have you handled entering a new leadership role and feeling inadequate? Have you ever felt this?
I feel inadequate every day. At some point in every day, I feel like I have manna is over my head, or so for me, it's my biggest challenge is getting past my mind and the way that it works, and so PTSD is very real in the way that it alters your perceptions. And so for me, it's a lot of using evidence, like, okay, I'm insecure and I feel that I'm like, is this how someone's perceiving me? And then I have to slowly think through the process of what is my evidence for believing that this is true, and does the evidence support that that is true, or is this a past fear that is coloring my way of seeing? And when also to put to take a deep breath and go, this is in my head, and wait for more evidence that whatever it is that I'm insecure about or fearing that I'm not doing well, that there's actually evidence that I'm not doing it well instead of just believing that I'm not.
Oh yeah, I've walked into many jobs feeling inadequate, but lots of self-talk, trying to get out of my head, reminding myself that I'm in my head, and just trying to be organic with things, reminding myself, okay, you're doing it again, you're doing it again. And yes, I'll have full-on conversations in my car with myself, but it helps me a lot. It helps me to get past that and just to, I hate to use this, but to go with my own flow. That's the best I can do. And I just got to remind myself that though.
I think we all have moments of inadequacy where we feel that. our own internal struggles with perfection. Like Senior Berger said, it's about getting out of your head and facing those for yourself. And for me, it's about having a wingman. If I can't get out of my head on my own, then I find somebody that I trust and that I feel like I can counter that back and forth with, and maybe validate some of the things I'm feeling or unvalidate them because I'm realistic. So for me, I think a wingman is super helpful.
Yeah, story of my life. But I again think that has nothing to do with me being female. I know the males in my squadron also feel quite inadequate at times too. It's just the nature of the military, I think, and for sure the nature of aviation. You get really good at one thing and you get thrown into a new job or an upgrade and you're back down at the bottom. You're really good at that and it's time for another one. So it's just kind of how it is. But it's career progression, that's how it works. You're never going to be great at something that you're just starting out with. So that's just the way it is. That's what I struggle with constantly, is like self-deprecating, like thinking I'm not good enough. I just can't, there's not enough time in the day to study everything. I don't know all the things. I've never done this in flight for real. So going out and doing it. So I fake till you make it. It's my for sure life motto, because that's, like I said, what stays sincere fear, it just they feed off of it. And so you got to at least act like you know exactly what you're doing, and then talk about what you messed up in the debrief and get better from there. But yes, I think that that's normal to feel inadequate, but eventually, with time and experience, I think that feeling goes away, at least for a little bit.
I mean, every job, every day, every new experience, sitting at this table in front of you all, probably all of us would agree with that to some degree. The general answer for me is that I think if you're not consistently exploring your boundaries and pushing yourself, you're not experiencing life. So getting outside your comfort zone is really, really uncomfortable, and it's kind of where I'm the most satisfied, but not the most comfortable. So it's just about getting comfortable being uncomfortable in life, because my first roll call in front of 120 airmen, terrifying, and like incredibly inadequate. They don't want to hear my words. Why am I even here? They don't need to hear anything I have to say. And it's just kind of getting past yourself and preparing yourself and doing the work to kind of, even if you don't feel any different and you're still terrified, mentally preparing yourself for something. I think the chief touched on something that's huge, and that you just kind of have to accept and give yourself some grace for, which is a trauma of any sort puts a whole nother spin on that. When I had, one of my miscarriages and one where my husband was deployed, it was, again, a fairly traumatic experience. I had, you want to talk inadequacy, but it wasn't rational. I had been in a job for 2 years, I think. I knew all the people. I was very confident in the job I was in, but I actually spent about 6 months having trouble making eye contact with people. It wasn't rational. It didn't make sense. There were people that were very supportive of me. It wasn't any actual judgment, but like a trauma, it's like you have to actually continually that self-talk. And it's not rational, but it's there. And that's where I think if you ever find yourself in that position, it's just about giving yourself some grace and just taking it day by day and accepting that you feel inadequate, and that self-talk to realize that you can move past it and just being okay with it. Because it's not, you shouldn't feel ashamed for that feeling. Because again, just the norm that's how we all feel all the time. But if you experience something that takes it to that next level, it's just being kind to yourself and working through it and knowing that it'll pass and allowing people to support you through it.
Thank you. So my next question is actually 2 questions. What efforts can be made to reduce entry barriers to male-dominated career fields? Do you see any specific barriers to entry, or are there more retention issues?
So the only one I'll touch on is there's significant retention issues when it comes to in maintenance. Like I said, career fields, we've actually had a lot of women leaders in the maintenance career field as an officer, and maybe people don't lean towards it sometimes, and I'm not sure the reasons for that. We have significant retention issues when it comes to people starting families and childcare issues, and a lot of things associated, again, from a joint spouse standpoint. There's some huge retention issues there. As a woman in general, I didn't experience any of that in a negative light until I saw what it took to sustain a family being in the military. And again, just realized it's a tougher business, and that some of the support structures aren't set up to do it in the military. So hoping to see that change as well. But.
I think the Air Force is doing a good job of removing gender barriers that might have been there for females. I mean, like I talked about, you couldn't even do this back before 1993, so it's come a long way. But recently, they just, I think they did the height restriction, that was a thing for female aviators. So, you know, a lot of women are short statured and they were not able to fly airplanes because they were too short. So they've taken, I believe, that away. It's just, I think, airframe specific now, so that's awesome. And then I just think the biggest thing is just exposure, like girls knowing that they can do this, that this is an option. I didn't know any female fighter pilots when I was growing up, but like right now, the F-35 demo pilot team captain is a female. There's a female Thunderbird. I've been out to pilot training bases twice in the past 2 years just to expose ourselves that we are, no kidding, like this is, a girl can do this. There's just no reason you can't. This is an awesome job. I think a lot of people might be worried about the stigmas that we've already touched on about being a female in a completely male-dominated career field, but hopefully in the next 20 years that'll change as well. But I think we're getting out there, and I think I've seen a drastic increase in the number of pilot applicants that are females and the number of females, no kidding, in pilot training. So I think it's just the exposure piece for us. They're making it better as far as the restrictions go, and working with flight equipment. So hopefully those things will be better in the future for all females. And now they just need to know that this is a job that I can do and it's fun. I will love it.
So one of the things that I found really interesting was at one point, I went to a conference and it was in DC, and one of the panel members was speaking, and she was responsible for going in, if there was a political candidate that they wanted to have run for office, she was the one who tried to, like, hey, we think you should do this. And she said that whenever she goes and talks to men ask, do you think I can win? And when she goes and she talks to women ask, how do you think this will affect my family? So, blended retirement system. How many women do we think could have left the service over the years because they do their first enlistment? They maybe haven't gotten married, maybe haven't had kids, but said, do I think I can do this with a family or with kids? And said, if I take another enlistment, I'm investing 8 years now. And I don't get anything more when I walk out the door unless I make 20. So do I think that I can do this and make 20 years to get my retirement? And with the new blended retirement system, women can stay in the military and wait until they have had a family and gone, is this the right thing for me? And they're gonna walk away with something. And I think that changed with the retirement system. I think that was a huge door that was opened for increasing the amount of women that stay past their first enlistment, and is one that I really didn't hear us talking about.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you for adding in the blended retirement system. The next question is, do you have any advice for junior enlisted airmen?
I have advice for junior enlisted airmen, but it's not female focused. Like I said, the way that we started out asking how we became successful, and what we all said was we're still on the path, we're still getting there. But I think it's really important to start out thinking, what is success for me? Is like, what at the end of this career, or what when I finally retire, what does success look for me? And know what it means for you, what that is. Because for some people, it's rank. For some people, it's experience. For some people, it's financial stability. But for every person, it's different, and it's important to know what it is for you. And then the Air Force is a giant playground. And as you move up the ranks, unless you do something wrong, you really can't move back down. And there are places to go and things to do and opportunities to be had at each rank that when you promote, you don't have that opportunity again. So take time, and it's not like, unless you really want to get up to the top really fast, take the time to enjoy the level you are at and explore it and have all of those experiences before you rush to that next promotion. I rushed through all of my ranks because I needed that validation that I was okay. And when I got to the top, I looked back and I was like, man, there were so many opportunities that I blew past that I wish I'd had. So many things that would have been fun and great memories and great growth that would have made me an even better leader, but that wasn't the path that I took. And I oftentimes in mentorship, people are asking, what do I need to do to get promoted? And really ask, what do you need to do to be happy? And follow that. And it may not be the promotion. It may be, you know, I am rocking it in this job, and I know that if I promote, I am not going to be flying that plane as much. I know that I'm not going to be turning the wrenches as much, but you know what? I can turn those wrenches amazingly. I can fly that plane amazingly, and I'm going to be the best person doing it, and I don't need another stripe on my arm in order to get that job satisfaction and what makes me happy going home. So that's my leadership advice, or my mentorship is, it is a playground. Go out, have fun, do the best job you can at it, and go home happy.
I'll piggyback on what the chief said. Love your life. Like literally love your life. When you go home, sit on your couch and love your couch. There are going to be some tough days. You're not even going to remember driving home from work. It's just, your mind is going to be lost. But just remember that once you get home, love your life. Love the cups in your cabinet. Love going to the grocery store. Love those moments that you have by yourself, even if it's in the bathroom for 20 minutes scrolling through your phone while your kids are putting their fingers under the doors. But just love your life. I can't emphasize that enough. You're going to have some tough times out there, and it's going to be personal or it's going to be professional. But just remember at the end of the day to embrace that moment when you lay your head on your pillow and how good that blanket feels around you. If you can take the time out to just love the little things, you're going to wake up and you're going to make it through the next day, I promise.
All right, thank you. I wrote down love your couch because I love that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. All right, so the next question is for Sandy. Do you feel that your experiences as a female civilian are similar to those that the active duty panel members have spoken about? Or do you feel your employment experience have differed because you are a civilian? What similarities, differences of experiences have you noticed?
That was a little difficult to answer. I'm in a primarily female career field. So for me, I'm not going to have a lot of those biases that other people have in terms of my gender. Also, I don't make some of the sacrifices that my panel members have had to make because I am a civilian. I made the choice to stay home with my children. But I think there are similarities in the past because we all have to sacrifice. We all serve the same Air Force, and it comes with dedication, it comes with time, it comes with energy, and it comes with a desire to serve. And when we have those things, we often put ourselves before we put others before we put ourselves. It goes back to what we've all been saying. We give so much that we often lose sight of what our personal needs are. I think that is a similarity. I think the difference is the path I travel or the path civilians travel to serve is just slightly different. But our sacrifices are the same.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any last comments that any of you have for our audience?
So just thank you guys, and some of the feedback on, I mean, you can't say lean on the airmen with the chief and the seniors are out there, you can't say it any better than that. I was loving my couch with my favorite coffee mug last night, so very much relate to that because it was one of those days which they happen often, and I would just encourage you guys to ask questions, have these conversations. Don't just have them with women either, have them with some of these challenges that women face. Some men have supported women through situations, whether it's as mentors, as family members, things like that. And you'd be amazed who comes out of the woodwork when you're willing to just say, hey, here's what I'm struggling with, or I would like advice on this. Again, I've had some men mentor me through uniquely female things that were way more effective sometimes and gave me insight. And I've had cases where it was quite the opposite. So just speak up and keep having these conversations, and don't be afraid to ask somebody if you feel like you're struggling through something like that. You know, speak up and find a mentor, and it's not always who you expect, and it's not always somebody in your organization, and keep a hold of those people, because you'll deal with these situations throughout your career. And I can't tell you the number of people that were, you know, maybe a master sergeant at my first base, or you know, a lieutenant I worked with, you know, 15 years ago, that I still reach back, and I'll have one of these days. And there were 2 people I had phone conversations with last night that I don't work with, that you find those people you connect with, you can use as sounding boards. And some of these challenges aren't as isolating as they can feel when you're going through them. And again, it doesn't have to be the extreme stuff, just some of the day-to-day, how do I mentor this person? How do I give feedback to this hard situation? The only thing I would piggyback on some of the feedback is just be willing to receive those transparent conversations in return. Because as a woman, I've been mentored very differently. People are sometimes afraid to tell you the more blunt feedback. Just be open to evolving with the Air Force, and it goes both ways. You know, be respectful both ways, and allow people to give feedback and ask questions in return. And I think the Air Force has come a long way. I'm excited to see where it's going, because people bring up those issues to your leadership. We don't always see it, even if we've experienced it. When you guys bring it up, there are people really passionate about these things, making changes with lots of stars on their shoulders. And I will tell you right now, I've been a part of some of those efforts in ACC. I have never seen the momentum and the buy-in from senior leaders. You know, we have a lieutenant general on the headquarters Air Force staff who's experienced some of these things and is championing some of these women's efforts. Again, 4-star General Holmes, you'd be amazed to hear some of his advocacy for women, because some of his closest friends couldn't do what they wanted to in his early stages of career. He'll tell stories about pilots who couldn't do what they wanted. So bring those problems up, because this time is a pretty powerful one, because people are listening and they're really trying to make changes that would have been impossible in earlier stages of our career. So we want to hear from you guys, because some of those things we probably aren't relating to or realizing they're happening, because we've all been living it for a lot longer, in condition to some of the things that you guys are still struggling with.
All right, thank you, ladies, for coming here, taking time out of your busy schedules, opening up and sharing your stories. Thank you so much for those vulnerable stories. I learned a lot about you guys. I had no idea that you were an athlete, so that's pretty cool. And I'm sure the audience has learned so much too, so many tips and advice from all of you. We can clap for them. At this time, I would like to introduce our guest speaker. Please give a warm welcome to the 366 Fire Wing Military Treatment Facility Director and Service Commander, Colonel Michelle Hayden.
Okay, so good morning, and what an inspiration. And so thank you for all your thoughts and the time that you took to come and do that today, as well as everything you prepared for this event. It's amazing, and so I wrote down some notes. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say last night. I was reviewing some of the questions. So really, what did the military need to me? It meant opportunity. There was a lot of opportunities that I didn't have maybe growing up, and when I made the decision to join the military. So my journey started in 1984. And I was a Navy sailor, I was a Navy corpsman, and left for boot camp. And when you all had asked us give us a picture that was important to you. So if you see my picture, the picture for the brochure was also the picture that I had for my 06 penny. And to go from E1 to 06 was surreal, because really to me, being a Navy corpsman and enlisted, and when I got to the Navy or to the Air Force, when I made captain, to me I was like, whoo, I made it, I'm there, that's it. Now I probably overstay my welcome because I'm I had about 35 years. So captain, they said, well, you know, everybody makes that. And I said, no, I looked at the stats. There's like 15 people, 15% who didn't. So we have come a long way. I could definitely tell you that. So 1984 coming in and going to boot camp, that was a lot different than it is today. First of all, I remember them saying, hey, you know, cut your hair kind of short. And my recruiter said, yeah, that looks good. And I got there and they sat me down in the chair and they cut it off. Pixie, whoop, cut all my hair off. Okay, so that was gone. So it's one of the big things I remember, as well as, yes, it was really challenging. I wanted to be challenged though. I wanted to come in and be challenged, and I wanted a better life. And I really wanted to see what my potential could be. Then, going from the Navy, the big differences. So when it came to the end of my first enlistment, I'm like, hey, you know what? I want to go to France, Bermuda, but what I really want to do is I want to go on a ship. And they said, yeah, okay. We don't do that with women. And matter of fact, you may be 5. And so we had one opening, and it was for an E4 Navy corpsman on a tender. So for the Navy, the tenders would go out to sea for the day, work on the ships, and come back in at night. So right before I was leaving, they decided to start sending women out on ships. Whew, that was the talk. They're all going to go out and get pregnant, right? So I kind of watched that for a little bit, and they left, and sure enough, we were about 2 weeks in, and about eight ladies came back, and then I really never heard more about that. So then I had some inactive reserves time, and my husband was going to the reserves. He was finishing up his time, and I'm like, ooh, yeah, I got a baby. So if I go to reserves the weekend, my mother-in-law's going to watch her. And we're going to have some date time and time to get away, because we had to drive about 70 miles. So I went to the recruiter with him, and I said, you know what? I just delivered my baby 3 weeks prior. I want to join the reserves. And they said, okay, well, you know, the first thing we're going to do is you got to do your height, weight, all those kind of things. And I really did gain it much during pregnancy, and I lost it all pretty much within 10 days. And so they're like, we're holding you to these standards here, and you need to be 5 pounds lighter, and we're looking at your body fat, measuring everywhere, you know. And so I remember going out, and I would go to my mother-in-law's farm, and I would take her and my daughter, hand her off to her, and I would go trudge around in the snowbank for a while. So I went back about a week later, lost 10 pounds, joined the reserves for that. During my reserve time then, had my second pregnancy. And so they said, hey, guess what? You know what? You're going to go shoot this weekend. And I'm like, got this thing attached here. And I'm about 7.5 months pregnant. And they're like, we don't care. So that was not my first challenge. My first challenge was we did not have maternity BDUs. And they said, uniform of the day is BDUs. And I'm like, I got to get creative. What am I going to do with that? So I went home, and my husband and I were the same rank. And so I grabbed his jacket. And then I went to one of the t-shirts that made my panel. They go between the buttons. And then my pants were kind of falling down, so I grabbed my father-in-law's suspenders. And so I got out there, and I'm like, I'm here to shoot. They looked at me no different. Okay, we're starting with the M16, so you need to lay on the ground, look down range. And I said, you know, they talk about bringing up concerns. I'm concerned. I can't lay on my belly like that and shoot the M16. They said, and by the way, you know, my baby's ears are formed. They can hear what I'm doing here. And so they said, fine. You know what? You don't want to shoot today? We got another job for you. I'm like, all right. So they took me out, and, you know, at that firing range, they had this square cement, you know, that stood up out of the ground about this high. And they said, you're going to squat in here, and you're going to change the targets in between everybody. So it was hours that I sat in there like this, and I would stand up, change the target. And so that's what I did. So we wouldn't even consider most of any of that right now today. Really a changing point that I saw also was Desert Storm. I got called up to be activated. And my daughter was probably about 8 months old then, and I was concerned because a couple weeks later they were also activating my husband, and he would go to the Marines, and his life expectancy for his job was about 20 seconds. from what he needed to do on the front line. So that really was eye-opening to me as a mother. My first choice would probably be my mother-in-law would take care of her kids if something happened. But really I was like, well, my children, will they even know who we were? Expecting that the worst can happen, and you have to live with that if I leave and something happens. So he did not get activated, and actually I ended up not going. I had a ruptured appendicitis right before I was supposed to be ready to go, but that did play into my decision because I had to take a break in service. Because number one, I was getting my nursing degree, and that was the only way to do it. I couldn't do it on active duty, and I did not have picked up the enlisted commissioning program, and you could still be successful. Then I had to work a little harder, and I did that. And so at any rate, I took my break in service, and I said, I cannot commit to this if I can't deploy. If I have to make that personal decision, if I can't be my very best, and I don't really feel like I could go on and do that right now, then I need to take my break in service. So I had my second son, and he was probably about 18 months old. My daughter's about 3.5, and I'm like, you know what? I got my nursing degree, went and did civilian nursing, and I'm like, what in the world is going on in these work environments? Are you kidding me? We talk to each other this way, or we don't talk to each other this way, or we don't care about each other. So two things brought me back to the military. One was camaraderie, and the second one was that people were held to standard for behavior. Okay, so that was back in '94 when I came back into the Air Force, and so that was really important to me to feel valued, and I will tell you in my career I definitely have. I wrote down some other things as we were talking. Back to my picture. Why was my picture? I'm sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. Why was that important? That picture is important to me when I'm in my enlisted uniform because people will tell me, you don't understand, or you don't understand what it's like being enlisted. But I try to always keep that in my perspective. What was the 19-year-old Michelle thinking? What would I think about being in the dorms for 14 days on quarantine? And hey, don't leave this, I don't even know if it's 100 square foot, maybe 80 square foot room. Don't leave. Don't go out and do anything. So some of those things I try to think about. How do we make things easier, as well as, most importantly, don't ever forget where you came from, right? I was that E1. And also don't forget, you can be successful, and that the military has a lot of opportunity to offer everybody. So last night I also wanted to look online to see what else is different. It's amazing to see female pilots, but I will say we have always been there, whether on active duty or supporting, right? Claire Barton, Red Cross, Florence Nightingale, taking care of soldiers, made great strides. She was a leader in nursing for just how do we take care of them. We keep them clean environment. We care for them, keep them warm. Then during World Wars, women's went into factory and took care of that. They flew as test pilots for planes. So we've always been there supporting the military or being on active duty now as well. I like what you really had to say about, sometimes conflict, it's uncomfortable. And it's uncomfortable to speak up, and so how do you get around maybe some of those situations about biases or something that might be very uncomfortable in the workplace? So how you get around it is you need to set the tone when you go into your environment. We're all leaders. Everyone in here are leaders. Expectation management, what you expect. So I thought back to all my career, being a supervisor, being a first line supervisor, being a commander, my current position, and I think what we've gotten better about is messaging. And so I even thought about, okay, the other day I did the newcomers along the executive team at the MTF. We go into, this is what you can expect from me. This is what I can expect from you. And then my other one is, this is something we will never accept. And that is where the harassment bias is based on anything. I don't care who you are, I just want you to come to work and do your job. To get better about that, I will also say, I don't remember having first sergeants like, hey, you're responsible for the morality unit. You're responsible for letting the commander know what the morality unit is. So I think we've done that right. I don't remember, and maybe it was there, and I didn't think about it, having EO or IG, you know, or other places for anonymity, from comment boxes, commanders boxes, open door policies, that you can come in and talk to me. So all those things I think have really changed, as well as really senior leaders putting the messaging and focus on all of those things. Interestingly enough, I was assigned to look for fall, and I hadn't heard a lot about the women in the military for a while, or specifically, hey, you're a woman, you can't, because once you tell me I can't, you got my attention, and that's what I'm gonna do, that. But it wasn't Brooks Summit Medical Center, assigned to look for fall, attached to Brooks Summit Medical Center, when the big announcement came. And for the medical world, the big announcement was the new 2 surgeon generals have just been named for the Air Force and the Army. And it was Dorothy Hogg, who's now our Air Force Surgeon General, and Patricia Rojo. And I will tell you, they busted the rip off the place, because they were women, they were nurses, can be the Surgeon General. That was quite the buzz in my career. What? You know, and I told them, we're the nurses, we're women, we're coming in to take over. Better watch what we're up to. Okay. So kind of common themes I hear here today, and just to add my own flair on that, is one of the things I've said over time is, first of all, about setting the expectation for your environment and what you will not tolerate in your environment. So one of my biggest things is, whether I'm mentoring somebody or otherwise, is what you tolerate will happen. And if you walk past it, it becomes a new standard that people are going to think that that's okay. The first time you say, you know what you just said or did, that's not okay. And we're not going to do that anymore, ever. The other saying that I've said a lot is, if you want to be successful, surround yourself with successful people. Well, I will tell you, in the military, there is no better place, because one of the things I also noticed about being in civilian nursing is, the more successful you come, there was also people there who were jealous of that as well. To ever have an opportunity to really be a leader in some of those organizations, other than leading my team when I was taking care of my patients, somebody probably would have to die, because they stayed in the house for a long time. So what was appealing to the military was that opportunity for upward mobility. Now, when I came in as a lieutenant, I was very ornery, maybe still ornery today, but because what I had is, I had a different experience, and everybody was pushing me, you know? Get these task signs off, do this, go here, do that. I'm gonna have you this, and I'm like, you know what? I don't want to do that. Like, I just want to be me and do my thing I'm doing here. And they're like, Brigadier General Janine Ryder, she ends up watching this. She was also another one. She ended up being my group commander twice. I was her chief nurse, and I was one of her squadron commanders. And she would sit there and look at me and say, if you're comfortable, you're not growing. And so I know, even when I got picked up to come to this position, I literally swear to God, I did not sleep for a week. And I thought, what were they thinking? You want me to do what? And then challenges, COVID, pandemic, okay? One of those haven't been around for about 100 years, so you want to talk about challenging, that has been challenging as well. I don't feel like in my profession, or what I'm necessarily doing, or as a leadership team here or other places I've been, that I have been not valued or didn't bring value to the table of being a female. So if you want to be successful, surround yourself with successful people. Don't stop. I will tell you, every time somebody's telling me to stop, you know, that really makes me engage even more. I did want to add to the piece about pregnancy. When you're pregnancy, and somebody asked questions about pregnancy and promotion and what's the challenges. What I've seen as a commander with challenges with that is, women, you're going to be out of the duty session for 3 months, right? If you have a high-risk pregnancy, you might be out for 6 months. And so during that rating period, when I would go back to the people and I'd see their evaluations, commander, I'm like, whoa, what is this? And they would come back with, you know what, I didn't do this, and I didn't get that done, maybe, and I didn't have time, and it came so quick, you know, and it was a year. So that's something to be in perspective. For my pregnancies, even when I planned on them, I'm like, that's a surprise. How did that happen, right? So, you know, sometimes planning, if there's events that are going to come up that are very important timelines that you absolutely cannot miss in your career, it's not that you may not be pregnant, you may be, but how do you plan around that, and what is your mitigation plan for some of those things that might come up? Another theme that I sometimes tell people is knowledge is power, right? So one of the most important things is, and what I've seen lately, I'll use the pandemic again, is knowledge is power. We don't have a lot of knowledge, and maybe you're looking at medical, you know, we should know all these things, or what do we do this, what do we do that? It's something totally new. But to all the junior enlisted, that was another question. Knowledge is power, and you're going to come into, you may feel like, I don't know that, or you're pushing me. They're pushing you to be better. They want you to develop. They want you to have rank. They want you to be successful, and embrace that. Embrace maybe sometimes feeling uncomfortable. But knowledge is power. You need to study really hard. If you're going to go represent your unit or yourself anywhere, you need to make sure that you're ready for that, right? Knowledge is power. Read up. Be very smart on that. And then I'll say probably, you know, staff sergeant, tech sergeant, master, and probably captain and major. There's your sneeze. I'll tell you what. Those are the smart people, you know, in the organization that you really want to listen to, because they are in the thick of things, and knowledge is power. They know their jobs the very best. And then from there, you should go higher in rank. You're kind of, how can I, you know, what resources, equipment, training can I provide so that you are successful? How can I advocate on your behalf? I've many times been asked, how do you know if you're successful? I will tell you, with every assignment, I would go to my family and say, are you done, or do we keep going? Particularly for my spouse, because I will tell you that I feel like he is really, I have led the charge, and he is also medical by nature, but right now is trying to accomplish his commercial pilot. So when I look back at his resume, I'm like, your resume isn't so good. It looks like you're like a kind of a flight, you move all the time. And so it is important to have that family balance and asking them, are they ready to have another assignment? So when I have ever been asked, you know, what would be successful to you? The day that I retire, if I still have my family by my side, I've been successful, because the positions, the titles, the awards that I held are not important. And so please recognize that now, that sometimes I'm working with people and they're like, well, I don't want to do that job because of the position, or I think that this would be better for me. And so my other big advice is you need to bloom where you're planted. And I really do believe, and actually looking back on my career, that your leaders have your best interest at stake. So do that. The other thing is, in your work environment, how can you be successful is, have you ever heard anybody say, that's not my job? Yeah. Okay, I love it when that one comes up, because guess what? Everybody's job is everybody's job within your scope of practice. There's certain things I can't go practice today as a physician. I'm a nurse, right? You're a maintainer, you don't have to necessarily fly the plane. But those are, I think, some of what I've heard as common themes in here, as well as looking over 35 years, maybe what was the most important things. There's many jobs I thought, oh, I don't want to do that. And those ended up being my absolute most rewarding, best scenarios I ever had. And it was time to leave. I'm like, oh, I'm good. I'm good. They're like, nope, we're going to challenge you some more, and you're going to go somewhere else. Mentors, you spoke about mentors, and now you had different people, you know, men, women, or whoever that you went to as far as your mentors. Those are very important, but I'm going to ask for you to get two kinds of mentors. You're going to have really rough days at work. And you're going to need to call the mentor who's going to be like, it's going to be okay. You're so great. Do you want me to pray with you? Keep on. And sometimes that's my mom. She's like, I'm just going to pray for you right now. You're going to be fine. Then you want the mentors to call and say, this is what I did. And they say, you know, that's really dumb. Why'd you do that? Like, you really fell on the sword on that one. And so they're going to tell you what you're doing wrong. There's probably a lot more that's going to say, you're just great, you're going to be fine. So really seek out the other mentors who'll be like, nope, you really messed that up and you need to really get yourself together. Or you should have been here, you should have been here, you should be doing this, or you're behind. What's important for your career as well is your opinion. And so I preach this all the time, but I was at the booth like, I'm getting into it. I'm so busy. You know, I was the just-in-timer, and when I look back over my career, I think, you know what? It was an amazing career, but boy, there was a lot of other amazing opportunities as well, and maybe I sold myself short on some of those. Not that I regret anything. I'm not one for regret. I'm like, I believe that you're where you're meant to be, that there is a plan greater than Michelle Astrom's. So really, those are just some of the things that stuck out. And thanks again to the panel members. Thanks for being honorable to stand up and talk about this. Also, I'm really excited that I saw an article, ma'am, that they're going to have maternity flight suits. That's coming up. Okay. So that's great. So also back to Colonel Stevens, what she was saying is, you know, what are some of the challenges? This might be the equipment. Definitely some of my challenges were the uniforms. Certainly nice also that we give people, you know, we say it takes you about a year to repair your body after pregnancy. That, you know, I got that year, not a couple of weeks to get back into the fight. So thank you everybody for coming, and thanks for this great event. It's always great to get together and celebrate success, because everybody, everywhere in the room today, or if you're listening online, you are successful, and the military is a great opportunity to further what it is you're looking for in your life.